Hey friends, I am here to talk about the dark moon in Cancer that is happening tomorrow on July 14th. Um, Mercury is still retrograde. It is sort of kicking my ass. So what I'm going to do is pull up the astrology wheel. We're going to go around the horn, kind of see what's going on. And then we're going to talk about the energies that we are working with and that we're dealing with this dark moon in Cancer. So because Mercury is retrograde, do not be surprised if the video seems to be like pausing and starting because I've got my list of notes here to try to keep things straight and move at a good pace. But if I have to pause it to collect my thoughts, I will. Okay, so I am going to pause it right now and pull up the astrology wheel. All right, here we go. As you guys can see, the dark moon will be taking place in New Orleans around 3:20 a.m. tomorrow morning. Down here, we've got the sun and the moon. They will both be at 21 degrees of Cancer. We are in Cancer season. We are at the height of a Mercury retrograde. And everything is really up in the air. Like I would say, like feels really bubbly. Like if you were thinking like you're just kind of floating in the water, and all these bubbles around you. That's how I feel. Like I can't get anything too grounded. Like I'm trying to get things to keep moving. But things are really up in the air. And even this moon cycle, having a moon cycle end and begin in the middle of a season, for me, it's just really disjointed. Like I'm used to the moon cycles ending and beginning either towards the start and ending of seasons. Um, but just the way that the precessional cycle works, there are times when they are ending and beginning in the middle of a season. The part that's making it a little more wonky is the fact that we are in a Mercury retrograde. And in what I can say with this, it is really shifting. And I know I say the word shift all the time. Trust me, it's not lost on me. But we are really shifting. We are in a time of shifting the way like the way we communicate about things, the way we feel about things. We are moving out of that age of Pisces into this age of Aquarius, as we keep saying. And Aquarius is fixed air, and it is just more intellectual. It's not to say that if you're a Pisces, you're not, but the idea of Pisces working with feelings, and we're moving out of that water earth axes and into the air fire axes. And this is really being shown right now, which we'll get to as we go around the horn. Um, but also the way that we communicate and the way that we're going to be getting our information is shifting, even in astrology. So one of my mentors, Heather Answorth, she works with the living sky. So when you go over to her channel, she'll put up where the planets are actually as we are speaking. This chart that we use does come from the age of Aries, right? And she even says those are these energies that we're moving away from. So again, the way that we communicate and how we communicate is changing. Um, Not just like here on the planet, but like even astrologically, how we're bringing in information and how we're translating it is changing. Pisces was really all about feelings and how did we feel, and unfortunately, like that lower Pisces was like no boundaries, like we were all up in everyone's business. And in a good example I could give right now, and I will get to the dark moon, don't worry guys. And I can see it in the chart too. But it's this idea of so one of our senators just died unexpectedly here in America. Okay. And however you deal with his politics, but basically he hooked his wagon to power. He wanted power. And whoever was in power at that time, he just kind of went along with, right? And I do believe, and this is just me personally, I do believe you kind of die how you live. And he died very unceremoniously. He the past few years of his life, it's shown he had a drinking problem. Which again, lower Pisces, right? I don't know his sign. I don't know this senator's sign, but like, um, it just ever since, he said things about our current president and then just went against him and buddied up to him so he could have this sense of power. And his life just went, meh, his drinking was increasing. He was standing up and like butting up and like convincing people to do things that I think he knew which weren't correct in the way the country's like constitution and stuff works, but he didn't care. He was all about power. Um, and now he just died. And so a lot of people, which this is not wrong, are like giving him compassion about, oh, it must have been hard because he was a gay man, like to be in this position and to be, grow up at the time that he did. And, he felt like he had to be closeted and, all these things. And this is where, okay, that is very, to me, lower Piscean, okay? Because I am an Aquarius, by the way. And it's not like, and I don't have, and I mean, it's not like I don't have compassion for people. I do. And is there a point where I have compassion for the senator? Of course, because I am a person. But at the end of the day, to me, I would tell you guys to knock it off, okay? The man chose his path in life. There are plenty of people who are gay that pick a totally different path and have used their positions of power to actually help people, whether they identify as a Republican or a Democrat or what, okay? And so this idea of like, oh, he had to struggle and no, he didn't. He didn't struggle. He's been in this position of power for 31 years and he picked a lot of shitty policies. Um, and whether, you think they're shitty or not because of your thing, uh is fine. Okay, like we don't have to argue about that. But the idea that we try to paint him with a more compassionate picture than what he actually was, right? That sword's energy is like coming in and being like, knock it off, you guys. That's no, this is he chose this way. He could have chose differently and he didn't. Okay, so we don't need to keep bleeding all this compassion over a grown person who could have picked differently and they didn't. And that was his plight, okay? And that was up to him. Um, and that's how he chose to live. But the thing I'm trying to get about communicating differently, in these shifts in communication, and I see this, well, I can see it like with um this idea with Chiron, honestly, but like with Uranus, hold on, I wrote this down. Uranus, hold on. Uranus and Gemini, right? Uranus and Gemini, um, who is conjunct, Mars and still conjunct Sedna, right? And, Sedna is the betrayal, right? Gemini is how we communicate. Okay, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is retrograde. That's why we're here. Ugh. Okay. But the old way of communicating about this person might be giving them like this pass about, oh, it had to be so hard and, this, that, and the other, when the man lived a beautiful, privileged life his whole life. He could have picked many different things. And I'm not saying there weren't any sort of challenges, um, you know, there, because we all have challenges, but we also all have choices that we make, and this is no shade on him for staying closeted. That was his choice. But the reality of it is, he wasn't that deep. He wanted power, full stop. So we don't need to be throwing all these weird, heartfelt, this, that, or the other. The reality of it is, this was a living person. He had friends, he had people that were close to. Same with the other senator that's on death's door or who might be already dead. Maybe not my favorite person, but I know he had a family that loved him. There's people that saw him as Pop and Granddad, that I never saw, right? And so, but at the same time, having that and knowing, there was people close to him that loved him and saw him differently. But the reality of it is, this is the way they chose to live. This is the way they chose to show up. These are the policies they chose to make. Okay. And we don't need to. sugarcoat it or make them into something they weren't. I know that one of them had a wife and the other one probably had, beautiful lovers and friendships and all those things. And those people saw them differently than we will ever know. Okay, yes. But the persona that they gave out did all these things. That were just for power and greed, okay? And money and all and however else. So that's that, okay? Um, this different way of communicating about things and especially like getting out of narcissistic relationships is this age of Aquarius, that sword, right, coming in. And Gemini is swords, Libra is swords, okay, in the Tarot. And it is cutting through. And, I'm saying getting to the truth because everyone does have their own truth. But we're moving more into a space where it's like, well, fortunately or unfortunately, these are all the things he did. These are all the things they voted on. This is how he showed up. And this is what he was doing right before the man died. You know? Um, and that's that. And so the idea that we all have to go and um, try to rewrite the story with compassion, we don't have to. Okay. Again, I know I'm repeating myself. I have compassion because I know he's a person and there are people that know him differently than I did and then loved him and will always see him as that. That's just how people are. Okay. But the bigger thing is he was showing us who he was. And who he was someone who just wanted to be cozied up to power. And he didn't give a shit about all the other people, right? That maybe could have used a little bit of common sense, right? And so this idea that we're getting back to more common sense. This is who he was. He showed us who he was. He showed us those were the things he thought were important. Okay. Instead of us putting a different story on him, one that makes us feel better, one that humanizes him more because we can feel the love in our heart. We don't need to keep doing that to people. Okay. And that is a huge shift we're getting into. And I will say this too, and this is just me getting more on my soapbox. We need to realize too, especially when it comes to like politicians or entertainers or people like that, especially coming out of this age of Pisces, a lot of them are on drugs, okay? And I don't mean like normal drugs, like, like drugs like, okay, like you're on an antidepressant, all this kind of stuff that kind of helps you get through the day. I mean, like these people had full-blown addictions and they were good at hiding them. Okay. And so a lot of times when you're with people who are, because, and I'm, the amount of stress, okay, I'm not dismissing that. The amount of stress that are on people to get things done and all this stuff, that shit is real. Okay. And a lot of people deal with that different ways. And some of them is drugs. Okay. So if you're meeting someone, who maybe is a politician. And this is, I don't know if I'd say entertainment purposes only or whatever, or, an entertainer and they seem very present and they seem very in the moment and they're there with you right then. And you had like a good, you know, second with them. Great. Love that. Understand that. I say, but also understand they may be on drugs. Okay. Like they keep showing this one clip of, the senator who died, and he was talking about what a good man Joe Biden was after his son had passed and how he showed up for them, and he was getting a little teary. And I was like, he was probably drunk. And this is entertainment purposes only. I don't know if he was drunk at that time. I know that he was en route to a thing at a bar where then he did get more drunk. But you guys have really got to understand, people are people and people do have addictions, especially coming out of this age of Pisces. And, you know, people are showing you who they are. This man showed us who he was. He wasn't as far as policies and all that stuff go, depending on one side, you can have all these stories. But, he died the way he lived. And the way he lived was that he wanted power. Okay. And we also have to see where people who are in our lives what it is that they want, okay, and see if there's some sort of addiction tied to it. Okay. Maybe they're only, like we can't keep dancing around that people are kind to us because they're on that perfect combination of drugs, that keeps us feeling unsafe and unstable. And we're moving more into this age of Aquarius where we're going to be feeling more stable because Aquarius is a fixed sign. Aquarius's original ruler was Saturn, who wants boundaries. And it's kind of funny now because its modern day ruler is Uranus, who's like pew pew pew, um, which could make us feel unstable or things coming out of the blue or the aha. But the reality of it is because it has that honestly dual ownership from Saturn, Uranus, it is like Uranus is bringing in things to make us feel more stable. Uranus is bringing things out that are keeping us unstable. Okay, so don't be surprised. Also, don't be surprised when all these people start dropping dead because they're fucking old. Ugh, you know what I mean? And I mean, I am very lucky. My parents are older than this guy, and they are like healthy and happy and, not drunk 24/7. And I'm sorry I keep saying that about this person. Bless, but we need to take take that in consideration when it comes to these people. Um, they really do show us who they are, okay? And we need to start communicating that is who they are. I would love to feel like he was really this soft, kind soul or some. I don't think he was. I think he liked to party because, I mean, who doesn't, And he loved the fact that he had power. Full stop. All right. I'm going to pause, reconnect my thoughts, and then keep moving. Okay. So let's go around the horn. So we have Mercury, the moon, and sun all in Cancer. They're conjunct. We have big Jupiter into Leo. Our nodes, our nodes are still at 0 degrees, okay, holding that space before they move signs. Sweet Venus has moved into um, Virgo. I'm not going to call you Capricorn this time, into sweet Virgo. This is White Moon Celine for you guys. She's also in Virgo. Um, Black Moon Lilith. She's in Capricorn. Pluto and Juno are conjunct in Aquarius. Here's our north node at 0 degrees, still holding space before moving. Neptune, 4 degrees of Aries. Saturn, 14 degrees of Aries. Vesta and Eris are conjunct in Aries. Sweet, sweet Chiron, 0 degrees. Another karmic turning point has moved into Taurus for now. He will retrograde back into Aries later, but right now he is holding that space into Taurus. And then, like we said, Sedna, Uranus, and Mars are all here together in Gemini. And Uranus, who does rule Aquarius, right? So we have Aquarius's ruler in Gemini, who is mutable air. So it is just shaking up the way that we are going to be communicating, um, moving forward, quite honestly. So we have a grand air trine, okay, with Venus, Black Moon Lilith, and Chiron. Okay. And this is about, and this again, earth signs is that feminine energy, right? The moon, the sun are dark, and Mercury is in cardinal water, which is also that feminine energy. And so it is to me this recalibration about the way we feel, okay, and the way we're going to communicate. And this is about with Chiron, Black Moon Lilith, and Venus getting back into our bodies, okay, because we have been outside of them for so long, especially in this age, in that age of Pisces when I mean, really, drugs and alcohol were a big theme of that, okay? And that was really about us disassociating and moving back into our bodies. And so this moon, the stark moon, is asking us, okay, how do we start to communicate differently now that we are starting to understand, like have this idea, like, oh wait, I can feel safe at home, right? The body is the home. I can feel safe in my body. But I really don't understand how that looks or feels or what does that mean moving forward. And so this is that time of recalibration that we're in. And it's really interesting because when we start to feel safe, right, in our home, then everything around us starts to change. When we understand the boundaries of ourselves and we put up good boundaries, then everything starts to change. And again, that goes back a little bit to that line of like when I work with women who have been in narcissistic relationships and even being in narcissistic relationships myself, like there's always that conversation you're having with yourself, like, none of this makes fucking sense. Like, I can see what's happening logically in reality right in front of me, but like, yet emotionally, and I'm being gaslit. Now we know what that word means. But I keep showing up to this, and now all of that is changing, right? All of that is changing. The senator liked power, full stop, and it was going to do whatever he could to get to it. Full stop. Okay. This person, X, Y, and Z, full stop. Okay. We don't have to keep making up a story that makes us feel good and then putting it on the person in order to um, basically change reality. Because at the end of the day, and even with working with narcissists, like reality has always been reality. We were the ones that kept us in that toxic relationship because we kept changing the story. We kept putting feelings on them. We kept and listen, this isn't taking a shit on anybody because I did the same thing, and it was just something I had to learn and go through and then realize. But as a collective, this is what's happening. This is what's happening with everybody in the universe. The moon and the sun um, er, is conjunct Mercury, who is retrograde. So that's a lot going on because you can see what's going on in Gemini. So maybe we are having conversations back and forth on how to explain this to ourselves, and I hopefully they're like good, loving conversations with yourself. And maybe you don't know exactly how to move forward because everything is so up in the air right now. Um, and that's okay. This is that liminal time. Especially it's liminal because the moon is dark, right? We can't see her. She's in this time of transformation, in this time of change. So if you guys could just give yourselves like some space, some rest, that's going to be very helpful. Um, Vesta and Aries are conjunct. I mean, Vesta and Eris are conjunct. Vesta is the home fires, right? Vesta is the hearth, the hearth and heart of the home. And Eris is that discord, okay? This is all about shaking up those home energies. Aries is that I am presence, and it's asking, who are you now? And there are bits of you that are coming to you to be like, oh, this is who I am, right? But we're not quite sure how to present it. So just take your time with this. I noticed like even with this Mercury retrograde, there's a lot of memories from childhood that are coming up. And I'm like, man, I haven't thought about that forever. And they're just like weird memories. Like I was remembering the other night just like what the news looked like when I lived in Oregon because it was just a local channel, and how how the things came up. I don't know. I haven't thought about that shit in years, but yet here I am, right? And it's interesting too because the news is how we communicate, right? And then it's the Mercury's retrograde. So a lot of these things are coming back. And again, it is just to observe, all right, and understand that we're moving. Pluto is at 4 degrees of Aquarius. Um, Neptune is at 4 degrees of Aries. Uranus, 4 degrees of Gemini. Jupiter, or is at 3 degrees of Leo. Okay. So all these outer planets are at 4 degrees. Okay. And what's interesting, it's Aquarius, Aries, Gemini, Leo, moving into that fire air axes, moving out of the water, earth axes that we've been in for so long. So we're moving into fire and air. And those 4 degrees are those young degrees, right? Not quite yet formed. That up here. Still thinking about it, right? Not quite sure. Those young degrees, that page energy. Okay, knowing we can get there, not sure how, but knowing we can. Okay. And so again, it's just reiterating, moving into this fire and air energy. Not quite sure what it's going to look like. Understanding we're in this huge shift. Okay, nodes at 0 degrees, Chiron at 0 degrees. When those outer planets, because they take so long to move, the fact that they're all at 4 degrees is signaling, okay, you guys, things aren't going to be the same, right? It is time to move forward. And we're in those infantile degrees of this, but it is signaling it is time to move forward. Um, I'm trying to write. So again, I know I already said this. Again, moving more a little bit into the intellectual. Maybe not sure how that feels. Okay, because dark moon, uh, dark moon, Cancer, right? The middle of Cancer season, middle of a Mercury retrograde, but understanding that's where we're at. Okay, understanding it's okay to be in this liminal space. Understanding, I don't know what to do with my hands, right? Maybe my body feels weird, right? Because now we're coming back into the body with this grand trine, right? Of all the feminine energies. Black Moon Lilith understands relationship. Mars understands our self-worth. Chiron is the wounded healer, right? He understands how to heal our wounds, and he's moved into Taurus. Um, Pluto with Juno up here, right? That are conjunct. Juno, again, relationships. Juno, the self, right? Juno is time, right? It's time. But it's time to have these relationships differently. And of course, to me, that goes back to that masculine and feminine that is rebalancing within us, okay? But also outside of us, right? We want our masculine to come into alignment. And the one last thing I'll say about alignment, and then I'll wrap this up. So if you can see this time as getting more boundaries, more in alignment, and getting out of that old, I mean, really getting out of that old hustle and grind. When, Pluto was in Capricorn, that is really when like things came on, like drop shipping and Amazon started to pick up pace, even though Etsy and all those things had been around, eBay, but they really started to pick up. It's really started to make sense. Okay. And now, and again, age of Pisces, so very fluid, um, on 24/7. Obviously, hard to say no, I guess, because they were trying to do things. And now that we're moving into Aquarius, Aquarius has boundaries. Aquarius is going to think about things a little bit more, and just moving from feeling to thinking is going to kind of, it's a different energy. So, people think really fast, especially air signs. So I don't know if it slows things down, but it's a different energy. Um, and Juno is asking us, how are we in right relation? Okay. How are we in right relation with our masculine, feminine, which is giving and receiving, right? Sun and the moon are masculine and feminine. Okay. In Cancer, the sign of the home, giving and receiving. Jupiter is in Leo, right? Leo's that fixed masculine because it's fixed fire. It's going to expand. That's about um that's about movement, okay? But it's about how can we receive? Where are we able to receive information, right? Juno. Where are we able to receive where are we able to receive how we feel confident in ourselves, right? Leo. Um, you know, getting out of this illusion, okay, which is, Neptune and Pisces. Neptune's in Aries, right, which is fire, which is moving instead of swirling. How are we bringing in what we can't see and able to move it forward, right? We've got to be just a little more intellectual. And because Mercury is also in Cancer, it's about how do we, not necessarily explain the feelings, but just understand how we're going to have it's explaining to ourselves that we're switching gears, not only individually, but as a collective. Um, and it is a little bit more about boundaries, right? It is a little bit more about being intellectual as we go. Okay, so I'm gonna end it there. I feel like this is really long and rambly, and you know what, you guys? Sometimes that's just how it is. This Mercury retrograde literally is kicking my ass. And the fact that we're in the middle of a moon cycle, in the middle of a season, is seriously kicking my ass. But hopefully, you guys can get some information out of this. We're just changing. Everything is changing, as in astrology, you know, Heather, getting us to reconnect with the living sky. Um, what is our feeling, our feelings being present, okay, bringing in some a little intellectual, but like this idea of being present, getting out of that age of Pisces where we were just thinking this person is like this and like that, instead of just looking at the present moment and being like, how is this person treating me right now? How's this making me feel right now? This is what I need to base my actions on going forward, right? So we're in that huge shift. Okay, friends, take a time out, enjoy the dark moon, see if you can get some rest. I know I'm going to get some rest. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can get in touch with me on Instagram, my email, website, or through here. So until then, next time I see you, I'm sure I'm going to be a little more focused and cooking with gas. Till then, though, have a happy dark moon in Cancer.